So picture this. You start your day like you would any other day. You check your bank balance, you buy some groceries, you fill up your car, you use your phone, and well, maybe you visit a hospital. And at the end of a long day, you sit down and you have a glass of wine. Well, this is a series of simple, unconnected choices, right? Well, what if I told you that these choices are pillars of your daily life, are all connected, that they all lead back to a single name, a name forged in one of the most ruthless corporate battles that South Africa has ever seen? Well, this is a story of how a hostile takeover, executed with the secret share raids and political maneuvering during the apartheid era. It didn't just build a company, it built an invisible architecture of modern South African life. This is how a cigarette company heist created an empire that you live in inside every day. This is the remgro heist.
Okay, so for us to talk about the remgro heist properly, we have to talk about the main characters of the story. And the first one, the first most important character of the story is Anton Rupert. So Anton Rupert, not to be confused with his son, the now billionaire Johan Rupert. So Anton Rupert was born in 1916 in a small town in the Cape Province. He went on to study chemistry and worked as a chemist and an industrial researcher at the University of Pretoria at the time. So we have to put a lot of things into context when we're talking about Anton Rupert because of the way that he grew up. He grew up with strong, hardworking values and a very strong enterprising spirit because he tried a lot of businesses that didn't work out before he started what would eventually grow to become Remco. So after he finished his studies at Stellenbosch, he then went and started learning about industry, learning about chemistry, learning about industrial processing and manufacturing, which is something that captured his interest greatly, and that led to him purchasing a cigarette making machine and starting to produce some cigarettes from his garage. And that slowly started to grow, which led to him and a few other cigarette manufacturers and tobacco farmers coming together and consolidating and forming what was then going to become the Vru brand. So the Vru brand, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. The Vru brand was named after a Dutch artist, which was almost like a shout out to Anton Rupert's Dutch heritage, since Anton Rupert was an Afrikaner. So during that time, the interesting thing that then happened was that it actually grew. The Vru brand made a lot of sales, was quite a popular cigarette with people because of Anton Rupert's understanding of the chemistry that led to the producing of high quality cigarettes at a low price and guaranteeing a good profit margin for the company. So as he started to grow and started to make more sales, he started to expand. He also brought new innovations such as the King filter cigarette, which was the first in the world. A lot of people don't know that, but that's quite interesting. I for one am not a smoker, but I think that maybe that's kind of like a big deal. So the interesting thing that then came about after that was that he felt that he needed to expand more and to grow his brand more, grow his company more, consolidate with other small manufacturers, and this led to the forming of Rembrandt. Rembrandt. It's hard for me to pronounce these names properly. But then he formed the Rembrandt in 1941, in 1948, I'm sorry. And this would increase the market share that he was getting. But then we also have to take into context the environment in which he was operating at the time, and the fact that the Afrikaner people were feeling that they were being left out of the economy that was largely dominated by the British people. So it was difficult for them to get funding for their projects. It was difficult for them to pull their resources together because they were not a dominant financial force in the South African environment at the time, which is something that Anton Rupert was slowly working to change. So now that I've given you this basic context of who Anton Rupert was, where he grew up, how he worked, and how he built his company from the ground up, brick by brick, now we have to talk about the man on the other side of the ring, the ops or the opponents that they were fighting against in this remgro heist. Okay, so now that we talked about Anton Rupert, let's talk about the second character of the story. A very interesting man, this guy. So Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, yes, those Rothschild, was born in 1931, and he was born into the legendary banking family of the Rothschild, and he was just born into money, and he was named after his uncle who had died in World War One. And would be educated at Harrow, and then later he would attend Trinity University for a history major, but then he dropped out and didn't manage to like fully graduate. But that didn't block any of his further pursuits in life, as we shall see as the story develops. He went to live in America for a little bit, and then eventually went back to London, and when he turned 26 he joined the N.M. Rothschild banking company. So this was the way for him to slowly start to learn the ropes of the company. And as the years progressed, in 1970 he was named as the chairman of Rothmans International. And the connection between Rothmans International and the Rothschilds was that during from the 1900s to like early 2000s, the Rothschild were a major dominant force in the financing world. So part of their financial interest was in South Africa, and that financial interest was a company that was called Rothmans Pall Mall South Africa. So Rothmans Pall Mall South Africa was a massive cigarette company. They were founded in 1820 by Louis Roth in 1890 by Louis Rothmans, and because of the British global dominance at the time, they were able to expand into different markets all across the world. So that's why you will, if you like go on Google and search Rothmans Pall Mall. If you go search Rothmans Pall Mall all across the internet, you're gonna find old relics from New Zealand, from Australia, of these branded cigarettes. They were truly a massive dominant power. They were like, this was the epitome of old money and old dominance that was backed by British political control and British political power at the time. So that's the most important thing that should be noted during this time, that there was a lot of influence from who was controlling and running the politics. That's why the events of 1948 that took place in South Africa changed the fortunes of Rothmans Pall Mall, and went on to change the Rembrandt and Anton Rupert. So now let's get into the weeds of the story. Let's get into the real interesting part, the climax of the story. So, but then I have to like give you a little bit more context, because you know me, I love to give you context. So in the 1930s, the South African political landscape was much different than what is today, because there were two major dominant forces in this political landscape, which was the Afrikaner minority, the Afrikaner white minority, and the British white minority. And the British were largely backed by the size of their empire and the economic dominance that they had throughout the globe. And Afrikaners were largely marginalized and left out too, just like the rest of the other South Africans were, although maybe to a less degree. I don't know really. So when you read about it, you start to realize that there was an interesting slow decline of British political power, which was eventually cemented by their loss of the elections in 1948 to D.F. Malan's National Party. So when this happened, remember in 1948, that's when Rembrandt was established as a company by Anton Rupert. So when this happened, it slowly gave way to an increase in the growth and African economic power, because they started to have a lot more say in the way that things were run in the government, and this gave them more economic opportunities. And what Anton Rupert started to do was very, very genius, because the Rothmans was a listed company. He could actually start buying shares and owning shares in his competitor's company. And this is what they actually started to do. But then obviously you want to be smart about something like that. You don't want to just suddenly just buy a huge chunk of your opponents, because they are going to start to notice it very easily. So what he would do was he would create some shell companies here and there, and then gradually begin to buy shares in the competitor. And by the time that they noticed this in 1958, it was relatively too late, because they had bought so much of Rothmans that they had actual controlling interest in it. And this was a massive cause for concern for the Rothmans, because these were the British, they are not used to losing power. And it wasn't just economic, it was also political, because if they lost such a massive force, that would be a very, very big impact, not only to the economic standings of the British in South Africa, but also to the political power that they had in the region in general. That would have been a massive blow. But then another thing that I should also mention is that in 1940 and 1945, between that period was World War II. And this is an event that fractured the already polarized white minority political landscape in South Africa, because some of the Afrikaners were largely aligned with the German side of the politics of the World War I, and then and then the Brits were naturally aligned with the Axis powers. So this created the further conflict, and to further cement the effects of the World War II was the fact that Britain had taken up a lot of debt that it owed to America. So their focus, in a manner of speaking, was much more spread out at the time, which made it harder for them to be able to stay on top of things 100% and be able to provide that economic backing that they used to be able to wield. So this is what actually led to Rothmans slowly slipping away from their hands, until in 1972 the Rembrandt group officially took over, and this had followed a somewhat nasty battle between the Rothmans International, which at the time was chaired by our second main character of the story, Sir Evelyn de Rothschild. who unfortunately for him had just taken over and became chairman of Rothmans International in 1971. So in 1972 he had tried his best to fight this takeover, but then, like I had mentioned before, the court of public opinion had slowly started to shift. The Afrikaner minority was now actually wielding the political power in South Africa. So in as much as he could have gone to the courts, he could have gone to the authorities and policymakers, Sir Evelyn de Rothschild was in a virtually impossible position. That's how Anton Rupert essentially took over Rothmans. So maybe I may have made a mistake by referring it to Rothmans International before 1972, because prior to that it was Rothmans Mall, South Africa. So when Anton Rupert took it over, that's when they named it to Rothmans International. So that's quite a mouthful to digest. But then let's talk about what happened after this, because what happened after this would set off one of the most dominant corporate finance events of the history of South Africa. So let's talk about it. So now we get to the fallout of all of this, the last act of the story, if you will. In 1972, after remgro had spoiler alert, in 1972, after Rembrandt had taken over Rothmans and changed it into Rothmans International, well, they continued to grow and grow even more, because this essentially turned South Africa's tobacco industry into a two-horse race, which was now between Rothmans International and BAT, which is the British American Tobacco. So there was still a lot of fierce competition, but then what Anton Rupert gained from this was the consistent churning out of cash from this new, even much more bigger company that he had now built. And as time started to go by in 1988, there was a little bit more tension in the air. There was starting to be a lot of sanctions that were going around in South Africa because of the political situation that they had with apartheid. So as one of the ways to kind of dodge the sanctions and to make it easier for some of his partners to do business with him, Anton Rupert essentially split his company and spawned off a new company that was called Richmond, which is now a massive shareholder in a lot of the global old money, classic fashion brands, luxury brands of different sorts. I'm talking luxury watches to luxury purses to luxury guns, if you can believe it, to even luxury boots, clothes, fashion houses. That's part of what has become of the original Rembrandt company. So he also now formed remgro, which is short for Remnant Group, which is now going to be an investment holding company. And right now on my tablet, I wanted to kind of mention the companies that they have stakes in the modern day South Africa today, because we alluded to it in the introduction part of this video, to talk about the different ways in which remgro has influence in the everyday South African's life. So maybe let me just go through the list a little bit. So they own 25.8% in Unilever, which is a manufacturer for food and home personal care products. If you wash, if you do laundry, if you take a shower, if you brush your teeth, there's something that Unilever is involved in. So they also own 28.2% in RMB Holdings. So mostly, if you have an FNB account, that's RMB Holdings. They also have something in First Rand, which is, no, I'm sorry, like First Rand is the one that's, if you have got an account with FNB, that's First Rand. If you also work with Total South Africa in some shape or form, maybe you go to a Total garage, that's also remgro because they own 24.9% of that. And they also own shareholdings in Outsurance and Discovery Limited, and they also own shares in Seacom, which is one of the biggest internet cable undersea companies, I believe. And they also own media investments that they have with Sabido Investments, which have got investments with like ETV. They've got investments with E-News Channel Africa and YFM and many other like various production houses. So as you can see, remgro is quite a massive giant today, and all of this was spawned off of that takeover that they did of Rothman's Pole Mall Africa. It's very, very interesting when you think about it. And sometimes we look at the companies in hindsight and think that, oh man, maybe they just maybe we don't really know how they got big. Sometimes it's really massive events that take place that influence the changes in the landscape of a company. But sometimes it's small little things that add up, like Hitler starting a war in 1940, like the changes in political standings. All of these things, they never really happen overnight. They just stack slowly. And today you have got remgro, which is $1 billion company that eats up everything. But anyways, this has been the Daily Signal. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. My name is Metimbe Thomas Chuma. I make video documentaries about financial corporation stories that happen in Africa that nobody speaks about. If you like that sort of content, this is the home for you. The Daily Signal, signing out.